Hi, hello, it's Nikki, and welcome to my messy bookshelves. Today, I thought I would come on here and talk about the books that I read in the month of April. So, my April wrap-up. I read a total of 10 books. I read 3 classics, 1 nonfiction, and 1 audio. So I really had a good reading month last month. It was not in the total books that I read, though I am pretty happy with reading 10 books in 1 month, but I really enjoyed a lot of what I read, so I'm very happy. You don't get that many good books in a month usually, or I don't at least. But the first book that I read was one that I have mentioned before on my channel, and that is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. And if you are unfamiliar with this novel, this is a classic, and this is a book, a dystopian novel set in a world where books are outlawed. And our main character is a fireman, and it is his job to respond whenever there is a report of outlawed books, people reading books, people having books, and his job and the job of the fireman is to set these books on fire. So he makes a friend, and he makes a friend who gently asks him a few questions that make him sort of question why things are the way that they are and why he's doing what he's doing. I really enjoyed this book. I had been meaning to get to it for years, and I was very happy that I finally read it. I wouldn't say it's my favorite dystopian novel ever, but it was a very solid, at least 3.5 stars. I wish I had a better way to rate books. Maybe I'll come up with my own rating system for myself. But that was the first book that I read, and I do recommend it. The next book that I read was The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, another book that I had been meaning to read for a very long time. And this book is vastly different from the series of the same name, but this book follows a haunted house, and we have several main characters, but one of them is Dr. Montague, and he invites 3 people or 4 people to join him at this house for the summer. That he rents the house for the summer, and he invites these people to come with him to stay in the house and observe what's happening in the house. And we see from the perspective of the different characters how they're feeling and how the events that take place in the house are affecting them. It was very creepy. I wouldn't say it's as scary as I thought it was going to be, and I am a chicken. It was scary, mostly because I stayed up till like 3 in the morning, and my small child came down the stairs when I was not expecting her to, and scared the daylights out of me. So yes, the experience was good. It was the experience I was supposed to have when reading a book that I thought was going to be scary. The next book that I read, I might as well get both of these out of the way because I know people might say, why are you always reading these? But I read 2 different Agatha Christie's this month. The first one that I read was Spider's Web, which is one of her standalone novels. Doesn't have one of her famous detectives, but this book follows a young diplomat's wife named Clarissa who she's very carefree and always the life of the party, and she likes to entertain her guests, and she comes across a body at a very inconvenient time in her drawing room, and she has to solve the mystery before her husband arrives home with a very distinguished guest. This one, like I said, is one of her standalone novels. To me, it is one of her more forgettable ones. I had read it before, and I didn't remember who done it because it's not the greatest, not my favorite. I reread it because I couldn't remember, and these are usually palate cleansers for me. I usually reread Agatha Christie's. The next one that I read was Mrs. McGintys Dead, and this one is actually one of her Hercule Poirot books. So I did enjoy this one better than Spider's Web. I always enjoy Poirot books more than not Poirot books, though I do enjoy many of her standalones. But this one follows Hercule Poirot as he is trying to solve the mystery of a maid, a sort of daily woman who comes in to clean people's houses. She was murdered. Someone was already on trial for her murder, but the detective in charge of the case goes to Poirot because he doesn't believe that this person is guilty. And, you know, typical small town English countryside, Hercule Poirot going around asking questions and making people very upset. Enjoyable, enjoy it very much. Not my favorite of the Hercule Poirot books, but still lovely to read. So I would definitely recommend that one. The next book that I read was The Maid, which I have also talked about before. This one is by Nita Prose, and this one follows a young, they don't exactly say if she is on the spectrum or not, but that's kind of the vibe that I got. But she is a neurodivergent main character. She struggles with social situations and talking to people. She is employed as a maid in a luxury hotel, and she comes across a body in the penthouse. And the entire book is them discovering who done it. Wasn't my favorite. I enjoyed it. I might read the second one, depending. I was a little disappointed in the whodunit because to me it was really obvious, and I don't like that in a whodunit, but it was enjoyable. Probably one of my least favorite that I read this month, though. That one and Spider's Web. The next one that I read was Broken America, and this was my nonfiction that I read this month. And this one I know that I talked about in one of my weekly wrap-ups, and this one is a study on various social issues that are affecting America right now, and the authors dive into various social aspects of our culture and how they contribute and play into making people poor and keeping people poor. So this one, I really, really enjoyed this book. There were some parts, very few parts, that I didn't quite agree with, but I was nodding my head most of the time, and I really enjoy how at the end of each chapter they gave sort of a way you can help if you want to try and help the various social issues that they talk about. So I really enjoyed this and made me upset in a lot of ways. So that was that. The next book that I read was one of my favorites of the month, and that was Piranesi by Susanna Clark. And this one is, I can't really give too much of a description on this one because I feel like it will take away from the unraveling of what's going on. And you might hear my dog's yelping. He's sleeping and he is dreaming. He is running in his sleep. But this one follows a person named Piranesi who lives in this house that is, it changes, the rooms have very strange things happening in them, and he goes from room to room, and as the book continues, you start to kind of figure out what is going on. He lives in this house. There is one other person who he calls the other, and that is the only other person that exists in that house with him. And I will not say any more than this. I loved this book. I loved slowly starting to figure it out, and by the end of it, I was fairly sure I knew what was going on, and I was mostly correct. So I loved it. I loved how strange it was. I loved the descriptions of what was happening in the house. And yeah, loved it, loved it. Highly recommend this book if you are into anything strange like that. And the next book that I read was The Castle of OT Tonto by Horace Walpole. And this one is another classic. And this one is one that I had been wanting to read for years as well. I got inspired to read it after watching someone's list of favorite Gothic novels. I'm sorry, I can't remember what channel it was. But I decided, oh, it's finally time for me to pick up this book. And I did. And I enjoyed it, though it was not what I was expecting. We do have a castle. We do have a sinister prince. But there was some other things going on that I was not expecting in this book. So it wasn't quite as Gothic-y as I thought it was going to be. And yes, I just made up the word Gothic-y. But enjoyed it a lot. Would recommend if you like Gothic fiction. And then the next book that I read was The Ogress and the Orphans. And my goodness, did I love this book. This is probably my favorite thing that I've read all year. So this is a middle grade, and this follows a town that used to be a nice town and a pretty town where the townspeople and neighbors helped each other, and everything changed when the library burnt down. So we are following the timeline after the library has burnt down, and people no longer trust each other, people no longer get together, they don't share, they don't help each other, and there is an orphanage in this town where now that people are no longer interested in helping their neighbors, they do not help the orphans in this town. There is also a very lovely and kindly ogress who moves into the town. And we see her relationship with the townspeople and the children who live in the orphanage. And I just thought it was so wholesome and so sweet. I even think I cried once in this book, but I loved it so much and I highly recommend it. So yes, my favorite thing I've read this month and this year so far. And the last book that I read this month is The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell. And this one was another one that I really enjoyed. I read it, I think I started it on the 29th and I finished it on the 30th. So very page turning, and it was extremely creepy. It was scary. I think this book scared me more than The Haunting of Hill House. So we have a woman who gets married. I think this takes place in the Victorian era in England. But this woman marries her husband and he dies very shortly after the marriage. She goes to his ancestral home and there is a locked up room and there are these figures, or yes, there are these figures who are in the room, and I will not say any more than that, but just know that I was scared and I could not put it down. So very, very enjoyable read if you like anything scary. So loved it, and I will not say anything more because I do not want to spoil it, but I highly recommend this book. But yeah, that was it for everything that I read in the month of April. I was very happy and very satisfied. And oh, I should probably give an honorable mention to this one. So I have been chipping away a few pages at a time. I will definitely not finish with the group read of this book. I am only a little over 100 pages into this book. I keep putting it down to read other things, and with a book this size, you want a nice chunk of time to sit and read it. So I will continue to chip away at it because I am enjoying it. But yes, this one did not get finished, but I am still reading it. I'll probably continue to read it. But that is everything that I read in the month of April. And I thank you so much if you stuck around to the end of this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.